Welcome to Your Cup of Counsel, Law Talk served hot. On today's episode, we're featuring Bird and the Bear, a local San Francisco coffee roaster, brewed or roasted right here in Cole Valley, San Francisco. Teaser, it's fantastic. We've already tried it. And for today's discussion, we're talking about what Tamara and I do for a living, the practice of law, our specific practice areas, and a couple tips and takeaways for people that may have cases. So like, subscribe, and listen in.
Hi, Anjay.
Hi.
We are here, episode 1 of Your Cup of Counsel, our little brainchild over the last how many weeks or months have we been thinking about this?
Feels like 5 months?
5 months, yeah. And I think you and I separately have been thinking about it for a lot longer. But we just started working together in January, December. And we're law partners at Altair Law. And we have different practice areas. But I think our thinking about this podcast is to talk to the public about what we both do and hopefully give some legal information about the crazy world of the law to people that aren't lawyers.
Yes, I think that's right.
That was my vision. What was your vision?
Agreed. I think it's to make legal topics that people face in their everyday environments, work settings, more digestible and understandable so people have access to information and can have like baseline questions answered.
Yeah. One thing that really has always frustrated me is the lack of knowledge that's out there to the public about the law, right? And I always felt like that in law school. And I think our job is to try to bridge that gap a little bit, hopefully. And so we're just going to talk here about, for you, personal injury law, for me, employment law, and any other things that people really want to hear about. That's the other thing, is we want people to tell us what they're interested in so that we can put a legal lens on it and talk about it from our perspectives.
Yeah, agreed. I think we want everyone to engage and give us comments on what they want to hear about, what topics they want us to uncover in various episodes. Just keep it really casual and conversational.
Great. So why don't we get started by having you tell us what you do for work? What does being a personal injury attorney look like when you're representing plaintiffs? What's your day-to-day like? What kind of claims do you cover? Just tell us, give us your career life in a nutshell.
Okay. Every day is different. Every case is different. Basically, if there is an injury, a catastrophic injury, it's a case that I will look at for consideration to see if it's something that I can help them out with. I think a lot of people, when they think of personal injury, just think of car accidents. And personal injury really is so much more. I think my practice is probably only like 20% car accidents. I do a lot of construction site accidents, product failure cases, plane crashes, boat crashes. It really kind of spans the gamut. Like, there's such variety in my cases. Right now, I have a boat case. I have a helicopter crash. I do have a couple auto cases. I have some cemetery remains mishandling cases, which is a whole very unique niche area of the law that a lot of people don't know about. So yeah, I mean, anything where someone has been unfortunately killed or seriously injured is a case that I would handle.
And you represent the people who have been injured or their family members if they're no longer with us, right?
Exactly. Yep. And usually we're suing big corporate entities, corporate giants, and sometimes, just average people that were negligent when they were driving their car, and they find themselves as a defendant in a lawsuit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the hardest part about your job?
I think because I do death cases and catastrophic injury cases, the hardest part is the emotional side and dealing with people kind of in their darkest hour. Mm-hmm. But that also is why I'm so passionate about the work and why I feel like it gives me so much personal meaning, because I really do get to sit with them in that grief and try and get whatever I can out of the lawsuit to restore some peace and some opportunity for them.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense. I think one misconception that a lot of people have is that having a personal relationship with your lawyer maybe isn't necessary. And I think with the kinds of cases that you handle, it probably feels pretty necessary for you to advocate for your clients effectively. But what do you think?
It definitely does. And I think it depends on the personality of the client. And I always tell people, like, find a lawyer that you genuinely vibe with, because they have to tell your story. And if they don't get your story, they can't relate to you, or you can't be authentic and open with them, they're never going to be, a dynamic storyteller for you. But some people just aren't, into that kind of touchy-feely. Some people want a more buttoned-up lawyer, and they don't want to have dinner with their lawyer, and that's fine too. Like, there's a lawyer for everyone. Everyone has a different personality, and so I tell potential clients when I meet with them, meet me, meet other lawyers, like, see who you feel most comfortable with. My feelings are not going to be hurt. I have enough business. I'm not worried about signing every single client. And a lot of times, if I'm not the right fit for them, it's better off for me. Like, I didn't get into an environment where I'm uncomfortable, because I'm spending lots of time, personal time, after work hours, weekend hours, working on cases. And so I want to feel really good and solid about the relationship too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm actually, next week, I'm going to be going to my client's house to spend the day with them, because we're going to trial in about a month or two. And I just think knowing and having a really great relationship with your client, and being able to, know that their inner world a little bit more. And I think you do that through being in someone's home and, breaking bread with them and hanging out with them. And that, like you said, is so important for me to be able to present something persuasive to a jury. Like, I can't ever advocate or tell someone's story unless I feel like I really know it and I really believe in them and in their cause and everything. So yeah, I think that's definitely the way that you and I are very similar, even though we have different practice areas.
Yes. So tell us about your practice area, types of cases that you see, and what your day-to-day looks like.
Yeah, so I'm an employment attorney. I represent employees who have been fired, usually for retaliation, harassment, discrimination, whistleblowing, that type of thing. And my clients haven't always been fired. Sometimes they're suffering from harassment in the workplace, and they call me at that point, and they have a legal claim before they're fired. But generally, I always represent employees, and I also am suing usually large corporations and companies, or public entities like government agencies, things like that. So the vast majority of my work is sexual harassment, race discrimination, pregnancy discrimination. I have quite a few whistleblowing cases as well, where my client saw something illegal in the workplace, a violation of the law, and they either opposed it in the workplace and were fired because of that, or they reported it up the chain in their workplace, or to an outside agency, or to law enforcement. My day-to-day, I spend a lot of time talking with people about whether they have a legal claim, because a lot of people believe that their boss being rude to them or mean to them or a big jerk, frankly, may give rise to a legal claim. And it's a lot more nuanced than that. And there's very specific requirements for bringing a legal claim against your employer. So a lot of my time is spent talking with people who believe they might have claims, but maybe they do and maybe they don't. And same as you, I will tell them either way if they need a lawyer or if they don't. I'm very honest. I try to be very, very honest about that. And I will tell them, you don't need a lawyer. You don't need to talk to me. I've talked myself out of a job a lot of times, but I would way rather be honest than not. And I think a lot of things also can be dealt with internally without bringing a lawyer into the mix. And particularly for the clients of mine who are still working at the company, bringing a lawyer in to negotiate something or to talk to someone at the company really raises the temperature in the room. So a lot of times, I don't actually advise that that's the right path. So it's very fact specific and nuanced. But a lot of my time is spent talking with potential clients, but obviously I have a lot of ongoing legal cases as well that are at various stages of pre-filing of a lawsuit, during the legal process and in discovery, and then getting ready for trial, which is the ultimate last step in both of our litigation journeys, hopefully, unless there's appeals. And so same as you, it's different every day. There's different issues that arise every single day. And but I have great clients, and it's a luxury to be able to choose them the way that both of us get to. And yeah, it's never boring.
Yeah. I think our practice probably differs a little bit to the extent that when people call me, someone's been killed, someone's horribly injured, there likely is a case. So I spend a lot of my time talking to people, not necessarily about whether there is a case or isn't, but is there a path to recovery? Because a lot of my cases, there's limited resources, you're limited to insurance funds. But I'm sure you get more questions about, is there a case? Is this a claim?
Yes, absolutely. Such a good point. Yes. I think a lot of people watch shows like Suits and other legal shows that make them think that, and there's certain terms that get thrown around a lot, right? Like toxic, hostile work environment is one that is very widely misunderstood. And I think we're going to do an episode on just harassment and just that aspect of what I do. That's something really misunderstood. And just generally discrimination, how specific it has to be. Like it has to be based on your membership in a protected class, like race and gender and pregnancy and disability, and these long list of protected classes that we have in California. And so, in any event, it's a lot more specific than I think a lot of people realize. And then there's a lot of considerations around the right strategic approach to bringing a case when you might be suing your prior employer. Some of my clients have just been fired and they haven't found another job yet. And if that's the case, then we need to talk really carefully about what it means to publicly file a lawsuit and having your name associated with that before you've found work. And so there's all kinds of considerations that are required.
So there's so many nuances. Every case is different. Every fact pattern is different. Every legal claim is different. And you and I talked before we started episode 1 about what do we cover? There's so much content. How can we focus? How can we be most useful and bring the information to the public that is most valuable? So again, we really want to encourage everyone to give us comments. Let us know what topics they want to hear more about. And if you've got like a specific question, we're not going to dive into a very highly specific fact pattern. But if there's a general question that someone has, we really want them to share. And I know you had gone on before we launched the podcast and did like a teaser reel asking people, what were some of the broader questions that you got in response to that?
Sexual harassment is a huge one. And I think people just want to know how you could bring a legal claim for that, right? And as women, I think we're used to a certain feeling that you can get as a woman that is what I call the ick factor. It's that feeling where someone makes a comment to you, or someone gives you a look, or there's a tone of voice that's used, and it just gives you that creepy feeling. And I think there are a lot of women that experience that in the workplace. And the question that I get a lot is, when does that rise to a level of a legal claim? And how, if I'm experiencing a lot of what I'll call creepy conduct on an ongoing basis, what's the path to getting that solved and stopped, right? And when does it become a legal claim, and when is it sometimes people just being too sensitive? Frankly, that's a question that I get too, is, is it a legal claim, or am I just too sensitive around this particular person? So that's a big one. Sexual harassment is a big one. And probably also because it's covered a lot more, I think, publicly, with Harvey Weinstein and a lot of things that arose out of the Me Too movement in the workplace. Sexual harassment has had its day in the limelight lately. So that was a big common question, and one that was responded to on that reel.
So we'll do an entire episode on sex harassment.
We will.
Okay.
Yes. What are the most common questions that you get in a cocktail party?
Ooh, cocktail party. I think people want to know kind of the gore. What's the craziest case you've ever had? What's what are the 5? Just recently, someone asked me, what are the 5 things that you would avoid as a personal injury attorney? Like, what have you seen so many times that you're like, I should not do that? And I think my number 1 was walk under scaffolding, because I've had a lot of scaffolding failure cases. And it's funny because as I'm seeing cases, you start to perceive the world through a very skeptical lens, one that understands that products do fail and that people aren't following the law. So it's really interesting in my day-to-day how much more cautious I've become as an individual because of all the tragedy that I've seen under all kinds of scenarios. But
Sure.
yeah, I think I get that question a lot. I get, what's your wildest case? What's your biggest verdict? Some of just the standard thing. Do you know all the lawyers on the billboards? That's a fun one.
We don't.
Right.
Well, I don't.
We know a lot. I think I could probably visualize the 10 top billboards, at least in the Bay Area right now. And I probably know 7 of the 10. And then 3, I'm like, who are you? I've never heard of you. But yeah, I mean, billboard culture is a whole different, we could do a whole episode on billboard marketing.
We could. Well, what do you think is the difference maybe between a lawyer who's on a billboard versus somebody who is maybe lesser well known, at least to that degree, in the outside world?
So I think it's kind of a loaded question because I don't want there to be any misconception that I'm saying that like billboard lawyers are bad or you shouldn't hire them, because I think there's definitely a time and a place, and they're giving access and awareness to communities that have no access to attorneys. And so I don't know who to call. And I've seen this person on a couple billboards. That's who I'm going to call first. And there are some great lawyers that do billboard advertising. But I think on the whole, if you are an attorney that's doing billboard advertising, you have a different practice model. You're more of a high volume firm. Maybe you've got 100 attorneys on staff. So the person that's on the billboard is not necessarily the person that you're going to be working with. You're buying into their firm, but not that personality, that the accolades that individual may have are not necessarily going to be active on your case. So I think just knowing that going into it. Attorneys that tend to not advertise are smaller practices, more boutique practices, like the practice that you and I have in San Francisco, where we don't do any billboard marketing. A lot of our cases come a little bit more organic by word of mouth, prior clients, other attorneys. We get brought in on cases that other attorneys have handled that they really want to kind of level up on the lawyering, or maybe it's getting ready for trial and they need someone to come in as trial counsel. So those are the types of environments where we find ourselves coming into a case.
Mm-hmm. I've noticed that too. I most of my clients come in through friends of friends or former clients, or sometimes even defense attorneys that I've been on the other side of that refer cases to me after we've fought it out against each other, which is always, a lovely compliment. But I think it goes back to what you were saying, Anjay, about building that relationship. I mean, some of the stuff that we work on is so sensitive to people and really emotionally charged and difficult to navigate. And what I've experienced, and I don't know if you have as well, but our clients tend to really value having someone that is there by their side throughout every step of the process, all the way up until trial. And, if you've got maybe a smaller case and you don't need that personal attention necessarily, I can see why the high volume firms make sense maybe for that type of situation. But for a larger case with a lot more sensitivity involved, I think having that personal contact with your lawyer will make the legal process maybe better and more palatable, because it's not easy to navigate. And, if you think about, for you, some of your clients have the worst moments in their whole lives in like a split second. And they're forced to live either in that moment for the next 2 years, or worse, live in the past when it comes to other emotional stressors that they've had, or the bottom line is it's not a comfortable place for them to be, right? And they're having to relive that through the litigation process, and to have someone that you trust, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to, is trust. To have someone you trust with your heart and your soul and your emotions through that 2-year process and really tell your story properly. I think that relationship is really important.
Yeah, I think a good indicator is, do I have my attorney's cell phone number? And I'm all about boundaries, and you need boundaries and you need personal time. But with the practices that we have and the clients that we have, I think it's important that people be able to get in touch, and you set up boundaries with your clients, and they know, not to call all hours of the night. But if somebody really is in crisis or needs you to listen, to just be available for that, I think is super important.
Mm-hmm. Same. I'm hearing your ring clink against this lovely coffee cup, and it reminded me, what are we drinking?
We are having Bird and Bear.
So this is coffee that we're drinking, and we decided that this podcast should be coffee themed, mostly because we both love coffee. And we also love what it symbolizes, I think, which is energy and vitality and focus and a hustler mentality. What else?
Yes, strong, bold.
Mhm.
I like my coffee rich.
Mhm.
That came out wrong. Yeah, I mean, I think so many hustlers like us that are, putting in long hours, we need a little caffeination to
Mhm.
make it all happen. And coffee is my crutch. I love coffee. I have a cup of coffee every morning religiously. And it's kind of how I start my day. And there's so many amazing coffee roasters in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, but in San Francisco in particular, the coffee culture is really cool. And so we were hoping to feature a different roaster every episode, talk about the coffee, also get our own exposure to different beans. This is the first time that I've had Bird and the Bear so far. I think it's tasty. I'll put it in my regular rotation for sure.
Yeah, so I operated a French press for the first time to serve us these delicious coffees. And I definitely watched 900 YouTube videos. It was actually the same YouTube video 900 times to make sure that I was pressing at the right rate and for the right number of seconds. And I think that I would give it an 8.7 out of 10, not on the coffee beans, but on my technique. It's a little watered down for me.
Okay.
I need a little more of like a blood shot into my veins,
Okay.
So that's just me, but I'll try and refine.
The aroma that I was getting from the bag felt very strong and bold. So I'm going to blame the user of the press a little bit. Maybe
perfect.
we'll
Yes.
see. But I don't think it's too watered down. I think it's got a good kind of nutty whole flavor that I'm enjoying.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Maybe I just watched the wrong YouTube video.
Could be.
We could just keep blaming.
Right.
So Anjay, do you think that AI is going to replace us as lawyers?
Great question. I think I hate to say this, and hopefully our lawyer friends aren't watching. I think there are probably some areas that will be more impacted than ours, for sure. And I think that's primarily because both of our practice areas are so fact focused, and like the nuance that you will get in a harassment situation, for example, can't really be teased out by software. And then a lot of it is just, I'm assuming, you tell me, energy and vibe from meeting the players in the fact pattern that software is never going to be able to pick up and kind of nuance out. But tell me what you think.
I totally agree with that. I also think there are certain human aspects to the practice of law that are very hard to automate and impossible to automate, which is exactly what you just said. But I have a slightly different spin on it, which is, I mean, it's sort of similar to if you have a weird skin rash and you are looking up what that might be on WebMD and you see 55 different skin rashes that look sort of similar to yours. And at a certain point, you just need a human doctor to look at your skin and tell you what it is. And employment law is sort of like that, which is why associated with this podcast, we're going to have about 50 disclaimers that what we're doing here is legal information and not specific legal advice based on your situation. And our hope is to spread really good, solid information about the way the law works and when you should talk to a lawyer and what your rights are. Sure. But when it comes to actually analyzing the specifics of your case, you really do need a human lawyer to do that. You can't listen to a podcast. You can't really Google properly what is going on with you because the law changes so quickly and there's so many different nuances to it. And there's really serious hard and fast rules like statutes of limitations that if you don't follow them, you don't ever have a legal claim. So really important to talk to a human. But I agree with you. I think AI will make a lot of things easier, hopefully, both in the practice of law for us and also hopefully for the user. And if AI is only as good as the data that you put into it, right? And if it can be used and mobilized in a way that increases accessibility to all the people that need to know what their legal rights are, then I'm all for it. And I think it's great. But is it a cure-all or a way to avoid ever needing to talk to a lawyer? I don't think so. At least not for the type of work that we do.
Absolutely. And I think what you just said resonates really well as related to a call that I just received a couple of weeks ago that I'll share with you. But it's only as good as the data that you put in and the questions that you ask. And I think a lot of lawyering is knowing the right question to uncover the information. And that's where you can tease out the nuance. So I got a call a couple weeks ago from a potential client, and they had a case, and it was a valid case, but they had called a year and a half after the accident. And it was a government entity that was responsible for the harm. So there was a 6-month statute that they needed to comply with, and they missed it. And the woman was very pleasant. And she said, well, I Googled it and it said I had 2 years. And I was like, well, if it was a private entity defendant, you would have had 2 years. But since it was government, you had 6 months to file a claim. Now, again, as you said, disclaimer, there's all kinds of nuances, and you can file a late claim and try to, rectify that. But on the whole, she had Googled the wrong question. And so the information that she got was not pointed for her situation. And so it's really important to know. And like for me, I'm trying to incorporate more AI into my practice just for efficiency. It does great like graphic images. You can type in a timeline and ask for it to generate information in different ways. Like that's really helpful. And I do love that. But I would never have it do legal analysis, or I would never say, is this a valid claim? Because it's not going to have all the context and all the background information. And then for everyday people, they don't know what the lawyers are looking for, and they don't know what the AI software needs to do the appropriate analysis. Mm-hmm. So in most of the cases that we handle, you really do need to reach out, wait for the lawyer to pepper you with questions so that they can get to the bottom of what are your claims, what are the deadlines that you need to follow, and software, maybe it'll get there. It's not there yet.
I totally agree. And that is a heartbreaking story. And there's nothing I hate more than somebody who has a legal claim and just is barred by a technicality or some rule that, avoids them access to justice just because that's what the rules are. And that honestly is why you need a lawyer sometimes.
I think that's the number one, don't quote me, somebody Google it. I think that's the number one malpractice also, is lawyers missing deadlines. So I definitely wouldn't count on the computer getting it right. People get it wrong sometimes too, even despite all the analysis. And it's just better if you consult a professional for sure.
Yeah, agreed. That's also why when you're looking for a lawyer, it's a good thing to find someone who is organized and established and who can comply with deadlines.
Correct.
So you would like to avoid a lawyer that commits malpractice.
Yes.
Very, very important.
Agreed. Yeah.
So when a client calls you and you believe they might have a legal claim, what are some things right away that you want them to do to make sure that they're either preserving their claim or information that you need right away? Like what would people need to prepare, or what should they do immediately?
So they don't need to do anything to prepare to have the call. And a lot of times when we have our initial call, I'll go over a list. I'll say, give me the cross street if it's a car accident. Did you take photos at the crash site? Send me all the photos. Did you call the police? Did the police come and do a traffic collision report? Always call the police. That's my takeaway for this episode. Call the police. If there's an injury, absolutely call the police. Get a traffic report that turns out to be vital in the case. Did you go to the doctor? If you didn't go to the doctor and I'm your first call and you're not really injured, it's probably not a case that's right for me. There are attorneys that handle smaller injury cases. That's not my kind of practice niche. So I have a checklist of, did you do this? Did you talk to this person? Did you preserve this? And it's unique for every case. And I'll send an email after the initial call saying, do X, Y, and Z, or depending on the situation. And, like sometimes I'll get calls from someone who's lost a spouse in a car accident. I'm not going to give them a checklist of things that they need to go do. I'll take that on and say, I'm going to follow up on X, Y, and Z, but I do need to know basic stuff, who's your insurance company, what's your date of birth, so that I can make those phone calls on their behalf.
What do you say to people who are concerned about calling the police because they're worried that they might have been at fault in the car accident?
So interestingly, the officer's determination on fault is not admissible. And I know that's like boring, way down the rabbit hole lawyer stuff, but just preserve evidence and call the police and get it all documented.
So it doesn't matter, basically.
It doesn't matter. And a lot of times, unfortunately, the police get it wrong. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of bicycle cases where like a bicyclist is killed by someone that was making like a right turn and didn't check the bike lane. And the motorist is the only one there reporting to the police. And they'll say the bike came out of nowhere, or the bike was riding the wrong direction, or make up something that can't really be verified. And then they'll fault the cyclist. And then we'll get traffic surveillance footage that captures the accident and realize that the bicyclist was actually in the right and the car was wrong. And so we're able to, put it all together and present our side of the case. And that bad traffic report didn't matter. Like the opinions of the officers as to causation are not going to be admissible.
I don't know if a lot of people know that. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And so if you're a person that gets into a car accident, I mean, do you recommend the things that I've always heard that you're supposed to do, which is take a picture of the other person's driver's license and insurance and license plate and take pictures of the scene yourself and all of that stuff?
Yes. And I think some people are afraid, like, oh, if I grab my camera or my phone, everybody has their phone in their hand. If I start taking pictures, people are going to think I'm doing this for litigation or I'm like rushing into a lawsuit. Lawsuits are not for the faint of heart. Like, only file a lawsuit if you really have a legitimate claim. It's not worth the heartache, the money, the time, all the things. But that's really, you have to document the scene. A lot of times the scene changes. Like, at least here in San Francisco, they're constantly moving lanes and adding bike lanes and changing the lane delineation and, moving barricades. And so much is happening that you have to preserve the condition of the road. Because sometimes in a bicycle case or a car crash, anything involving the road, there could be an aspect of the road that contributed to causing the accident. So maybe it's not just the people that, have the impact. It could be a sign that was confusing or, a pinch point that doesn't make sense or not enough space for a motorist to pass a bicyclist. You shouldn't have a bike lane there. So there's all kinds of things that need to be considered. So whatever you can do to preserve photos of what the scene looked like at the time is super helpful for your lawyer.
So be your own photojournalist.
Absolutely.
Capture all the things.
Yes.
All right. Well, this was a lovely chat. We are going to close episode 1 of Cup of Counsel, your cup of counsel, my cup of counsel, our cup of counsel. And we're hoping that folks who have listened to this have some ideas for topics that you would like us to cover. We covered a lot of overview ground today, but a lot of these topics could be dug into in a lot of detail. And we're just hoping that we can provide as much information as possible to anybody who has questions about what we do.
Yeah. And if there's great local coffee beans that we should be French pressing and trying and commenting, let us know that as well.
Cheers.
Awesome. Cheers.